Is it better to have general knowledge or applied knowledge? It's a weird question, especially when you probably don't even know what the hell the difference between general knowledge and applied knowledge is. Well, it's something I was thinking about the other day. And the way that I kind of understood it after reading the Daily Laws was general knowledge is something that you get from either taking a class, such as college classes, a course, could be an online course, or reading in books, or maybe even a YouTube video like this one. And while it might give you information about the topic, it's not necessarily going to give you a full grasp, a full mastery of it until you actually start to apply that which you've already learned. And I was so guilty of this, operating on basically just general knowledge for so many years, that it really got me thinking about what the difference maker was. So for many years, I read tons and tons of books, whether it be on diet, exercise, finance, and networking. And while all of those books could be very useful, and I did learn a lot of things, it wasn't until you begin the application of those things that anything really matters in a lot of ways. And I'm not condemning books. I love books. I think you can learn a lot of things. But books will only get you so far. You can only learn so much from words on a page until you actually put it into action. And the best example I could give you is one of the books that I read that I think has had such a profound influence on me personally was How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a book about networking and just kind of learning how to talk to other people in a professional environment, as well as market yourself better, sell yourself, and also make a lot of friends in the process. One of the things that I had a big issue with before the book is I tend to not be able to remember a lot of people's names. And in the book, they had a technique for remembering people's names by saying their name initially and several times in the conversation so it would kind of cement itself in your brain. And the difference here would be the general knowledge is knowing that technique. The applied knowledge is actually going out and using it when meeting new people. So that was one of the first times where I took something that I had learned from a book and applied it to real life. And I actually had some pretty good results. But with that, one of the things that made the even bigger difference was not just the action itself, it was a reflection on the action. So for instance, I would go home after court. I usually would use this in court when I was meeting a lot of different either attorneys, clients, or judges, court personnel. There was a lot of people in the courthouse, and sometimes you'd meet upwards of 100 people in a day. Very difficult to keep track of everything. But when you started to use this method when you were having a discussion with somebody, I found I was far more likely to remember somebody's name, and then the next time I saw them, I was able to say their name even if they were far away. I go, "Hey Hank, how are you?" Or, "Hey Sue, how's everything going?" And I only did that because I reflected on my actions that day. I found some of the things that worked and some of the things that didn't. And not every single thing that was written in that book worked for me. Just like if you think about it, in all books, not every single thing is going to work for you. Just because it's written down doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work for you, or it doesn't mean that it won't. You have to take the action and then reflect on exactly what the heck happened and whether or not it was even what you wanted in the first place. Take finance books, for instance. A lot of them will talk about you need to save 10%, you need to put it into an index fund. Well, that may work. But what happens if your company is matching your 401k up to 10%? Then perhaps making sure that you put the 10% into your company's plan opposed to investing on your own might be more beneficial in the long run. It's just something to consider. It's something that you would look at, say, at the end of the year, you would reflect and say, oh, you know what? I made this return, and in this many years, I'll make that return. But if I did this on my own, maybe I would make more money. It's something to consider, and it's something that we need to take inventory of, I think, in all aspects of our life. One of the other areas that I had a lot of difficulty with was my diet. I had read tons of different diet books. whether it was the obesity code about intermittent fasting. I had read books about paleo. I had read books about Paleozone. I had read a book about keto. I had read a book about the Whole30. And I had tried some of those diets to some success. But ultimately, I never saw the results that I really wanted. It wasn't until I started to actually apply macros and understand how macros or macronutrients really played into my own diet, my own training, that I really started to see the results that I wanted. And I could have read every book on the topic about it, but until I was starting to apply it in everyday life, it was very different. That was where the rubber was really meeting the road. You know, you could read about a perfect macro split for breakfast, but when it's 6:45 in the morning and you got to be out the door at 7:15 and you got two kids screaming, you know, you don't necessarily have the ideal situation to make a 3-egg white omelet with low-fat cheese and stuff. And, you know, what are you doing with all the dishes? What are you doing with somebody screaming with somebody else? So it wasn't until I started to figure out how it worked for me in my own life, how certain things might work. Like, oh, hard-boiled eggs that are already made would work a lot better for me, for instance, than trying to make an egg omelet in the morning when I'm rushed, just like a lot of other people would be. And it's only because I had those actions and the reflections on what I was doing where I was either seeing the progress I wanted or not seeing the progress I wanted. And I think that if we took those kind of audit steps with every aspect of our life to some degree, whether it's once a week, once a month, once a day if you want, depending on your time frame, you may find that you start to move in the direction that you actually want. You know, anything that you want to change, you can change. But you ultimately need to do, in my opinion, really 3 things. But it's the last 2 that actually matter more, I think, than anything else. The first one is you have to learn about the topic. Whether it's finance, diet, music, theater, whatever it is, you got to have some general base of knowledge. Otherwise, you're pursuing something completely blind. The second step, and far more important, is you have to take action. You have to actually do something. Thinking about something for a long extended period of time is not going to do anything. I was so guilty of this for years on end. I would read self-help book after self-help book after self-help book, or diet book after diet book, and I would never get the results I wanted because I wasn't doing anything about it. And if you don't actually take the action, like I did with learning people's names or learning about macros, I would never know if what I wanted to do was actually going to work. And then lastly, it's the reflection part. I like to do it in a journal. Some people like to do it on an iPad. Some people just like to sit and think about it. It doesn't really matter what form you do. I prefer a pen and paper. Write down exactly what you're doing. For 2 reasons. One, it forces me to slow myself down because I can only write so fast. And secondly, because it's concrete. It's me actually writing down, this worked, this didn't work, this worked, this didn't work. What am I going to do next? And it's when you think about what am I going to do next with your action and reflection, that's the key. Give it a try. Find something in your life that you want to either improve on or change or alter. And start to take a small action. It could be as small as just trying to remember somebody's name by saying their name when you first meet them and trying to get it 2 more times into a conversation and see how that works. That's how easy it could be. It could be as grand as wanting to save up $1 million. The only way you do that is you start with $1 and you build. You see where it goes. Try the action, give it a reflection, see where it goes. Thanks.